Hey everybody, I hope you're all doing well. How are you all doing, first of all? Let me know in the comments. I wanted to come on here and give a little update on my health because looking back at the video I made announcing I had Graves, ooh girl, the dramatics. Like, I was not okay, but to be fair to myself, that was 0% disingenuine. I was just at a very, very low point with my health, and when I was diagnosed in January, it flipped my world upside down before the world was flipped upside down. I wish those two like counterbalance each other and my world was like reset to the right orientation, but it wasn't. I saw a video Chris Clemens did on his depression and going back on antidepressants, and I felt so validated and normalized by that video. It was one of the most comforting things when I was in like the deepest part of my depression this year, which I'll get into. It just doesn't benefit you guys to come on my channel and my Instagram and everything and pretend that like nothing's wrong and that I'm just doing a fantastic job of self-care and that I'm like somehow thriving in a global pandemic. Like, that just doesn't benefit anyone. I've been through a big old cycle this year. So to update you guys on Graves' disease, just after I filmed that video updating you guys is when I got on medication. So my symptoms of extreme anxiety, like racing thoughts, racing heart rate, insomnia, shortness of breath, like difficulty doing normal exercise where I was like labored trying to just get up a hill on a hike, like overheating really easily, shaky hands, a lot of those major symptoms that were like really just hindering my everyday quality of life and just feeling like I can do what I want to do, a lot of those went away. So landmark achievement, medication, medicine is incredible. It really erased a lot of my symptoms, but I just started the medication and then we never checked my levels while I was on the medication. So we never checked my thyroid levels. I didn't get blood work done. I just stayed on the same dosage for months and months and months. So by June or July, after like 3 months of medication, shit just started to shake up. Like, I was no longer feeling okay. I just sort of like slipped and fell into this pit of like extreme fatigue. I didn't want to get out of bed in the morning. I like dreaded going to work. I would like stay up really, really late at night because I was just like scared for the next day. Like, I just wanted to like preserve where I was at right then because I was like scared of the next day. For those of you that are in the working world, it felt like I had Sunday scaries and that like pit in your stomach that you can't really explain or like rationalize just all of the time. Like, I would be hanging out with friends that usually fill me up with so much joy and I just couldn't get there. Like, everything that I did felt labored, but like usually I'm very easily excited. Like, I'm a very enthusiastic, energetic person, and suddenly, essentially like none of the things that usually made me happy gave me any joy, and it was like this huge mystery to me. Like, I just could not figure out why I was so unhappy. I just felt so unsettled all the time. Like, I had this lack of confidence. I questioned everything I did. Like, there was no sense of self-assurance, self-awareness. Like, I started to lose a sense of my identity, and I was in therapy. I would get on those sessions and I would just start bawling. Like, minute 1.5 of talking to her, I'd be like, "Hey Laura, how are you doing? I'm good." And then just it was like, you have to get through that first minute of just like pleasantries with your therapist, and then you just like tell them how you're really doing. Like, it all just comes out in a wave. And she heard me out and basically said, "Listen, I mean, I think you might be experiencing depression." And it was like the very same specific feeling I had when they told me that I had an autoimmune disease, where my heart just dropped. It fell out of my ass. I'm not gonna say the room was spinning. It wasn't that dramatic, but there's a very marked like feeling that happened twice this year where like the bomb was dropped and things were just more serious than I guess I thought they were. Part of the reason for me that I was so scared to hear the word depression come out of her mouth is that I've had like a very close experience with depression. You know, if you've been around on my channel, it's kind of a Katherout deep cut, but I lost my best friend to depression. You would think after 4 years I could talk about it without crying, but still no. Sometimes I can, sometimes I can't. That's grief for you. But she was always, you know, very, you know, neurotypical, like consistently happy, like enthusiastic, stable person, and I like firsthand watched her slip and fall into this like really deep pit. I think things started to click that I might have depression when I started to say things this year that she had said to me when she had like very extreme clinical depression. Like, she would say that she felt like a shell of her former self, that she didn't know who she was, and I caught myself like naturally just feeling those same things, and it like completely jarred me because I was like, I couldn't even fathom that level of pain like 4 years ago, and now I was in it somehow and I didn't even notice that I was getting into it, and it just came out of nowhere. So it was like an internal struggle just to come to terms with the fact that what I was experiencing was depression, because depression and mental illness is something I've always taken very seriously. Like, I didn't ever joke about having a mental illness before this because I know how privileged and how much easier my life was because I was neurotypical. I thought I knew the devil and the demon that I was fighting 4 years ago for my friend, but I never did. Like, until you're actually in this. People say it's like having, you know, a rain cloud over your head, or like you're in a fog and you just have no motivation. And there's all these like cliches and trite sayings, but once you're like in it, that's kind of the only way you can describe it. Like, it's really hard to put into words like what it means for your brain chemistry to fail you. And suddenly I was like, okay, it makes sense that I can't just be happy whipping in my Camry listening to some Haim because I no longer have any serotonin. Like, my body was like, you get 2 serotonin molecules every month. Like, what do you want to do with them? Like, it was like, it felt like there was this very hard to access vault of my mental health, and like, I didn't even know where to find the key. Like, I just did not even know where to start in that journey. Fortunately and unfortunately, I do have a lot of friends that are mentally ill and like are not neurotypical and have chronic mental illness. While I hate that anybody has to experience this and ever feel these things, and I wish we could delete mental illness from the entire slate of humanity, it was helpful to have them because they, like, one of my friends in particular, Clara, would check in like almost every single day, and she just completely got it. She said things like, if all you can do is nothing, that is more than enough. Like, just waking up and getting through the day is incredible. Don't hold yourself to the same standard. Maybe I'll like screenshot and put some of the things she said because they were so genuinely helpful to hear it from somebody that had depression for years and years and was happily living her life. There was some sense of like, okay, people get through this and live every day of their lives with depression and have fulfilling lives and are okay. But because my brain was so dysfunctional, that realization was like so hard to tap into. Like, most of the time I was just like, I don't know when I'm gonna stop feeling like this. It's just gonna feel like this forever. Like, I can't believe this is just the new way that I feel. Part of the difficulty is that depression robs you of the energy to make changes. So even though you desperately want to feel better whatever the cost, but you don't have the energy to get there, which is this vicious, horrible cycle that people talk about all the time, but once you're in it, it is very true and real. There were a lot of days where I would just lay on the couch all day, not talk to anyone. A handful of days where I felt so mentally sick when I woke up that morning that I couldn't even get on email and I had to take a sick day. And I've always encouraged the idea of mental health days like as like a preventative measure, you know, like you need to take a break and you need to have a 3-day weekend and you need to not be giving every ounce of you to your employer because your health comes first. But I'd never needed to take a mental health day because I felt so ill, and it was my brain that felt ill. It wasn't my body. And that has been one of the huge hurdles this year, is that I've realized, you know, my privilege before being super able-bodied is that ableism is alive and well in the most subtle of ways in America. What I'm not going to do is pretend that I'm any sort of like serious victim of ableism. I do not require any sort of like major accommodations in order to like live and work. I mean, I work remotely, so I have a huge amount of control over like my daily life there. So I'm in like a very privileged position. I don't think you can overuse the word privilege enough, frankly, especially as a YouTuber. Like, I think it's really important to acknowledge like where I stand class-wise, racially. Want to acknowledge that. In no way am I saying like I have had a huge battle with ableism. I firsthand have really gotten to notice how difficult it is to tell your manager or your boss like, hey, I'm sick. People don't take that seriously. I think there's a little bit of boy who cried wolf here where, and it's horrible and awful in corporate America, where if you take a sick day, like a lot of times they're assuming you're not actually sick, which does a huge disservice to your employees. So if you're a manager, never do that. Assume if they're taking a sick day that they are actually like need the sick day. And definitely don't ask them what they need it for, because while first half of the year I was dealing with the shifts in my chronic illness and my autoimmune and my thyroid, and realizing how much of my daily function and like feeling is controlled by my thyroid. Like that little damn sucker is so powerful and so alpha that it literally manipulates my whole body whenever it wants to. Like, who knew the thyroid? I mean, took AP Bio, but like little did I know. Anyway, it took a lot of strength and courage to even just tell my manager, who's very sweet and wonderful, that I had this diagnosis and it was something that I was dealing with, because so many people live with Graves' disease and thyroid disorders and autoimmune diseases without huge flare-ups or without a lot of the symptoms presenting, I guess is how I'd say it. Like they're not really feeling the daily effects of that condition. So I felt like maybe I was being a little bit like self-absorbed by saying, hey, I'm dealing with this illness, I'm gonna need some accommodation from you in terms of like when I need to take a couple hours off and I'm feeling so fatigued that I can barely like get out of bed, like, or when my anxiety is peaking because my heart rate is at 120 beats per minute resting, like I need for everyone to catch me a break, especially because sales is a very fast-paced, high pressure, like high expectation environment, and it's so hustle grind culture extremist that it felt like to be a good employee, which is becoming less and less important to me, my health is the #1 priority for me, I felt like I couldn't take time off and I couldn't take breaks for my health, which is ridiculous that expectation is put on us. We should always be able to freely take care of our health. The only reason we have jobs is so that we can pay for my healthcare and my cost of living. I'm working a job so that I can take care of my livelihood, but my livelihood is impacted by that job. Like it's very, very disturbing when you think more about it. So here's the dealio. So it took me a lot of strength to come to my manager and say like, hey, I'm not doing well, I need help, and it's because of my health. But she was so understanding. She did have a friend that had a thyroid condition and was managing fine day to day. So I felt a little bit self-aware that maybe she wasn't going to take me seriously, and that because my experience with the same illness is different than another woman's at a different stage of her life, like my manager was going to think that I am blowing things out of proportion and just asking for like preferential treatment, something like that. So even when I did come clean and she was so supportive, I still was questioning like maybe I'm the crazy one. That was just my chronic illness. I have not told my manager or really any people in simple terms that like I have experienced depression this year, validated by my therapist. Like unfortunately it was actual depression and not just like bad feelings for a while. Like I felt like the serotonin was sucked out of my body and never to return. Like it was Dementor-esque feelings. I wish I could say I was a better mental health advocate and ally and like came in there and busted in and was just like, listen everybody, people are neurodivergent, I'm experiencing mental illness for the first time, let's make sure we're all accommodating and giving people breaks when they need it. But I didn't. Like when I took a sick day, I never disclosed why. Like I never disclosed that it was mostly because of my mental illness and not my chronic illness. Like there is still so much to be done in terms of like normalizing and destigmatizing mental illness and also accommodating it, because I found, and I was talking to another coworker about this who was dealing with their own chronic illness, is that you tell people, hey, I'm sick, or even in his case, hey, I'm at the hospital, and people are still expecting you to be on email and to answer their every demand within 5 minutes. And it's like, that's ableist. Like if you think someone's gonna be at your beck and call 24/7, like you frankly just don't understand that like everybody has a different ability level, and especially if you're neurodivergent, like you are not just gonna be able to be at 110% all of the time. Like it's just, I noticed that is you can say you're sick, but then people don't really treat it like you're sick. Like they're still expecting you to be online, especially now that we're working remote. It's like, okay, you're sick in bed rather than healthy in bed. How does that affect like your working ability? Like people just don't get it. And I can say that I didn't fully get it until this year. So I'm gonna do a better job about being an advocate and pushing for better accommodations at work or volunteer events, like whatever it may be, like accommodating different ability levels, especially when everything's virtual, could not be more important. So that was my situation at work. Fortunately, my therapist referred me to a psychiatrist. I was going to go see them, but before I did that, I met with an endocrinologist, which is a specialist for autoimmune diseases, and they immediately did blood tests and were like, your medication is way overcorrecting, to the point where I was no longer hyperthyroid Graves' disease, I was hypothyroid, which happens a lot, like for thyroid folks is like your thyroid fluctuates back and forth, but I had gone from like very, very high to very, very low within the span of like 2 months. So when I was experiencing high anxiety, that was hyperthyroid. That's a symptom of hyperthyroid. And then I shifted to hypothyroid, which frequently has a symptom of feeling depression or extreme fatigue. And that was like a gospel choir moment for me, where suddenly that vault of like, how the hell do I get out of there, was unlocked. He corrected my medication levels based on my blood tests. And within the course of a month, I never ended up having to go on any SSRIs. That's something I certainly would have pursued if the thyroid medication didn't work out. And this little buddy didn't do the trick, but fortunately that swung me back, still hyperthyroid, so of course still having symptoms, not perfect and not, you know, neutralized, but it swung me back to like light anxiety instead of like heavy depression. And I'm laughing, but like I remember telling my therapist, like, I don't feel like healthy. I don't love having anxiety, but it's something I'm more familiar with, and for that reason I'm more comfortable with it and it feels better because I've been hyperthyroid for more of my life. So I like relate to the anxiety more, and I know how to accommodate that. Which like over time, when you have chronic illnesses and stuff, you learn better how to take care of yourself. And I give myself full license now. Like whenever I am feeling a flare up of my mental health or my physical health, like drop everything, sirens are blaring, like nothing else matters. Because I remember as soon as I felt the relief of not having depression, like the only thing I wanted to do was just preserve that. Like I was full steam ahead at how do I preserve the serotonin and the happiness, and it scares me every time I do feel like even just mildly sad, because I'm worried that I'm gonna trip and fall back into the depression without even noticing. Right now my thyroid levels spiked again out of nowhere when they were steadily going down, so I'm experiencing another wave of like anxiety and this like pit in my stomach and horrible feelings. So right now I'm not feeling my best. It's like, it's just hard. It's hard to live with that. It's hard to live with any sort of chronic illness or mental illness where it's fluctuating all the time and you're having flare-ups and spikes and dips, and then long periods where you forget. For me, sometimes I'm lucky enough where I forget that I even have this. And that's like the goal. Like there's a whole body positivity movement, and then there's a whole body neutrality movement. I wish I could just not give a shit and feel completely neutral about this, then be like, yes, I am like a chronic illness like advocate and like mental illness advocate. I wish I could just like literally not have to deal with any of this, but I also recognize that like when my medication is hitting, I feel remarkably good. And like I am able to experience relief with my chronic illness. Relief mentally is a lot more difficult. And I do remember just in the pit of my depression, like relief was the hardest thing to achieve. Like just getting a break from it, like getting a 15-minute break from feeling like you are worthless, which is so bleak and sad, but that, and I look at my journals and that's how I was feeling, and I'm kind of entering into that mode again, and I'm hoping my medication correcting will fix the issue. But it's hard to move forward when you don't know the way that you're facing, is how I'd put it. Like it's hard to know which road to charge forward on. All this is to say, I want to be a lot more open about my mental and physical health. I love when vloggers do that in like a good little week in my life video, because it just like super normalizes that your health is such a driving force, and if it's not for you, that is like wonderful, you know? But when you do have any sort of chronic anything, it's like, damn, if your health is flaring up, like you got nothing, and like it's just all hands on deck trying to take care of that one thing. So I have a lot more empathy now for folks dealing with much more serious stuff for a much longer period of time than I have. It's just been a year for me that I've been dealing with all of this, and I'm documenting where I'm at. And maybe a year from now I'll be like, wow, I was still being dramatic then, everything's great and fine now. And I hope it is. Like I hope I'm able to report back in a year and be like, holy shit, I've done a 180. Look at what's possible, and like instill some hope in you all. But all I can really say is that it is a roller coaster, and you will feel relief. It's not gonna feel the way it feels right now forever. I can attest to that. My friends can attest to that. My doctors can attest to that. Like, it might sound like false hope and I'm just saying what people wanna hear, but that's genuinely the way it works, and it will work for you. Whether medication's how you solve that, whether it's coping techniques and therapy, like whatever that may be for you, like do not give up on yourself. I know that's the easiest way to feel, is that there's just no hope, and you're allowed to feel that way. but you're not allowed to actually physically give up. You can feel like you want to give up all the time, but you're not allowed to actually physically give up. You owe it to yourself to keep charging forward, and like, as cheesy as it is, like, you've gotten through 100% of your horrible, worst, most dreadful days in the past, so you can get through the next one. Like, you just take it one day at a time, and like, you're gonna look back at one point and realize how much progress you've made. So I would love to hear more about you all and your health and how you're doing in the comment section down below. Don't be a stranger, don't be a ghost viewer. Like, let me know if I'm being an absolute lunatic and dramatic, or let me know if this was helpful at all. It may not be, and that's okay. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you all next time, and Katherout.